Do not touch the war beast, not even if it looks afraid. Commander Lyra Voss's voice echoed through the observation chamber as every cadet at Varkos Military Academy stepped back from the reinforced glass. For 8 years, that creature had remained behind those walls, and for 8 years, every instructor had repeated the same warning. The war beast was not a companion. It was not a living being with thoughts or feelings. It was a weapon that had to be controlled. At least, that was what everyone believed. The massive creature moved slowly inside the containment area, its heavy footsteps shaking the metal floor beneath the academy. Karuin was unlike anything most of the young alien cadets had ever seen. Its dark, armored skin reflected the cold, white lights above, and the scars across its body told stories that nobody wanted to hear. Entire generations had been taught to fear creatures like this. They were designed for battle, built for survival, and considered too dangerous to understand. "Look at it," one cadet whispered. "How could something like that ever trust anyone?" Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Then the door opened. Daniel Carter walked into the chamber carrying a small medical kit and a tablet. He was not wearing armor. He was not carrying a weapon. He was just wearing the plain gray uniform of a human support technician. Several cadets looked at each other, confused. A human? Here? Near the war beast? Commander Lyra stepped forward immediately. "Technician Carter, stop where you are." Daniel looked up calmly. "I heard there was a problem with his health report." Lyra narrowed her eyes. "You were assigned to maintenance, not interaction." Daniel glanced through the glass at Karuin. "Sometimes those are the same thing." The room became quiet. To Lyra, that answer sounded dangerously naive. She had spent her entire career studying creatures like Karuin. She knew fear. She knew instinct. She knew what happened when people underestimated something powerful. Humans, in her opinion, were strange. They were physically fragile compared to many species in the galaxy. They lacked natural armor, advanced senses, and biological advantages. Yet they constantly walked toward situations where others would step away. "You do not understand what that creature is," Lyra said. Daniel looked back at her. "Maybe I don't." He paused for a moment. "But I know what it looks like when something is hurting." That sentence stayed with her longer than she expected. Nobody had ever described Karuin that way. The instructors described behavior patterns. The scientists described biological responses. The military described performance levels. But hurting? That was a word reserved for people. Daniel slowly approached the observation barrier and crouched down. He did not stare at Karuin like it was a threat. He simply watched. The creature stopped moving. The entire academy waited for the reaction. Cadets held their breath. Instructors prepared to activate security systems. But Daniel noticed something nobody else had. Karuin was not watching him like prey. It was watching him like it was trying to decide whether he was safe. For the first time in 8 years, the war beast walked toward a human without a command, without a signal, and without fear. And everyone inside Varkos Academy realized they might have misunderstood the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. Daniel Carter had spent enough time around dangerous things to know one simple truth. The loudest creatures were usually not the ones you needed to fear. The quiet ones were the ones paying attention. The next morning at Varkos Military Academy, everyone was still talking about what happened inside the containment chamber. The war beast had approached a human. Not an armed soldier. Not a military commander. A technician. Commander Lyra Voss stood in the security room watching the replay again and again, trying to understand what she had seen. "Run it one more time," she said. The officer beside her hesitated. "Commander, we have already reviewed the footage 6 times. Then make it 7. The screen showed Daniel lowering himself to the ground, making no sudden movements, no challenge, no attempt to dominate the creature. He simply waited. That was the part Lyra could not explain. Every training manual in the galaxy said the same thing. A war beast responded to control, fear, and authority. It did not respond to patience. It did not respond to kindness. At least, that was what everyone believed. "He got lucky," General Cale Draven said from behind them. Lyra turned around. The older officer walked into the room with his hands behind his back, his expression cold and confident. Cale had built his entire career around the War Beast program. To him, every creature had a purpose. Every instinct had a function. Every weakness had to be removed. "Lucky?" Lyra asked. Cale looked at the frozen image of Daniel and Karuin. A human standing near a weapon designed for war and surviving the encounter is not proof of understanding. It is proof of chance. Then why did it approach him? Lyra asked. Cale did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the academy grounds outside the window. Because the creature is waiting for the next test. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned to the containment area with a different set of equipment. He was checking the medical readings from Karuin because the creature had shown unusual behavior. Its movements were slower than before. Its breathing patterns were uneven. Daniel studied the information quietly. You are not angry, he whispered. You are exhausted. The security team monitoring him exchanged uncertain looks. They had never heard anyone speak to Karuin like that. Suddenly, the containment lights changed from white to red. An alert appeared across every screen in the facility. Karuin had moved away from the observation area and toward the far side of the chamber. The instructors immediately assumed the worst. Doors began locking throughout the academy. Cadets were ordered to leave the training sector. Lyra rushed toward the control room, her heart racing. What happened? She demanded. The technician looked at the data panel. We do not know. The creature is reacting to something. Daniel looked through the glass and noticed something different. Karuin was not trying to escape. It was searching. Then the massive creature stopped and slowly turned toward the entrance where General Cale Draven was standing. For the first time, Daniel saw fear in Karuin's eyes. Not rage, not aggression, fear. And he realized the academy had been studying the wrong question all along. They were never asking why the war beast was dangerous. They should have been asking what happened to make it afraid. General Cale Draven stood outside the containment chamber with the same calm expression he had worn during every inspection for the past 5 years. To everyone else at Varkos Military Academy, he looked like a man in complete control. But Daniel Carter noticed something different. Cale was not watching Karuin like a trainer watching a weapon. He was watching it like someone waiting for a machine to finally break. Open the communication channel, Cale ordered. Lyra looked at him. Why? Because I want to see if our human technician's theory is correct. Daniel turned away from the glass. What theory? Cale walked closer, his eyes fixed on him. That you understand this creature better than every scientist and instructor who studied it. Daniel stayed quiet for a moment. He had learned a long time ago that silence often revealed more than an argument. I never said I understand him, Daniel replied. I said I noticed something everyone else ignored. Cale gave a small smile. And what exactly did we ignore? Daniel looked through the glass at Karuin. That he is afraid. Several officers exchanged uncertain looks. The room became uncomfortable. Fear was not a word anyone used for the war beast. Fear belonged to weaker creatures. Fear belonged to prey, not something that had survived countless battles across the galaxy. Cale stepped toward the control panel. Very well. Let us test your observation. Lyra immediately looked concerned. General, this is unnecessary. Commander Voss, the purpose of this academy is to prepare warriors, not to protect their feelings. Daniel watched Cale activate the training environment. The chamber changed. The lights shifted. The walls adjusted. The academy's standard combat simulation began loading. Karuin reacted instantly. The massive creature moved backward. Not forward. Backward. Daniel saw it. Lyra saw it too. Wait, she whispered. It is not preparing to attack. The officers looked confused. Karuin lowered its head slightly, scanning the chamber. Its breathing changed. It was searching for an exit. For the first time, Lyra questioned everything she had been taught. Why would it react like this? She asked. Daniel studied the creature carefully. Because someone taught it that this room means something bad is coming. Cale looked irritated. You are making emotional assumptions. No, Daniel answered. I am looking at behavior. The general stepped closer. You think a human technician understands a military organism better than the scientists who created the program? Daniel looked back at him. I think a creature that spent 8 years being treated like a problem might remember how it was treated. The words landed harder than anyone expected. Even Lyra looked away for a moment. She remembered every report, every incident, every time Karuin was described as unstable. But she had never once seen a report asking what caused that instability. Then the chamber alarm sounded again. This time, it was not from Karuin. The academy systems detected a failure in the containment controls. The lights flickered. The security doors began closing automatically. Cadets outside started moving away from the training sector as instructors shouted directions. Cale immediately reached for the emergency controls. Lock the chamber. Daniel stepped forward. No. Everyone turned toward him. If you lock him in there right now, you are proving his fear was justified. Lyra looked between Daniel and the chamber. For years, she had trusted orders, training manuals, and military tradition. But standing there, watching the creature everyone feared, she realized something impossible. The war beast was not reacting to humanity. It was reacting to the people who claimed they understood it. And when Karuan finally looked toward Daniel, waiting for a decision, Daniel knew the next few minutes would determine whether the galaxy saw a monster or something else entirely. The moment the containment doors began closing, Daniel Carter understood one thing clearly. Everyone inside Varkos Academy was preparing for the wrong threat. The instructors were watching Karuan. Daniel was watching the people around him. "Commander, step away from the chamber," one security officer ordered. Lyra Voss did not move. Her eyes remained fixed on the war beast standing inside the simulation area. "It is not attacking," she said quietly. The officer looked confused. "Commander, look at its posture." Daniel heard her say it before he could. Karuan was not charging. Its massive frame was lowered, its movements careful, almost defensive. The creature was not trying to break free. It was trying to find a safe place. Then the emergency system malfunctioned again. A section of the training chamber shifted unexpectedly, causing the environment simulation to overload. Warning lights flashed across the academy. The instructors immediately activated the standard response protocol. Security drones moved into position around the chamber, designed to protect everyone nearby. Daniel stepped closer to the control panel. "Stop the simulation." General Kale Draven turned sharply. "Absolutely not. The system is making it worse. You are assuming you know what it needs." Daniel looked at him. "No, I am paying attention to what it is telling us." Kale ignored him and continued issuing commands. The simulation grew louder. The chamber walls changed again, recreating the same conditions used during military evaluations. To the instructors, it was only a test. To Karuan, Daniel realized it was a memory. The creature moved away from the center of the room and toward the far wall. It was the first time anyone noticed the small details. The scratches near the floor, the marks on the containment surface, the places where Karuan had repeatedly tried to avoid something. "Those are not damage marks," Daniel said. Lyra looked at him. "Then what are they?" He was trying to get away from the same corner every time. Before anyone could respond, Karuan suddenly turned toward the main control platform. The officers stepped back. The entire room froze. But Daniel noticed something else. The creature was not looking at them. It was looking above them, at the malfunctioning power system that was causing the simulation errors. "It is trying to warn us," Daniel said. Nobody believed him. Then the overhead systems began shutting down one by one. The training chamber lost power in several sections, and the Academy's automated safety network went offline. For a few seconds, the entire facility became silent. Lyra looked at the screens. "The containment field is unstable." Kale finally looked concerned. "Can it be restored?" "Not from here," the technician answered. "The manual controls are inside the chamber." Everyone looked toward Karuan. The solution required someone to enter the room. Nobody moved. Every person there knew the risk. Then Daniel picked up his equipment and walked toward the access door. Lyra stepped in front of him. "Daniel, if you are wrong, you may not get another chance." He looked at the war beast through the glass. "I know. Then why are you going?" Daniel paused. For a moment, the Academy saw the person behind the calm expression. A man who had spent years believing every life mattered, even when others decided something was too dangerous to save. "Because everyone here keeps asking how to control him," Daniel said. "Nobody is asking how to help him." Lyra had no answer. The door opened slowly. Daniel walked into the chamber. Every alarm in the Academy continued to sound. Every security camera followed his movement. Karuan turned toward him. The creature that had terrified entire worlds stood only a few feet away. Daniel stopped, lowered his hands, and waited. Then something happened that no instructor, scientist, or commander at Varkos Academy had ever witnessed. The war beast moved closer, not as a weapon responding to a command, but as a wounded creature choosing whether to trust someone. And for the first time, General Kale Draven realized he might have spent years studying the wrong enemy. Daniel Carter had learned one important lesson during his years working in deep space. The moment everyone else started reacting to fear, that was usually when they stopped seeing the truth. Inside the containment chamber, Every alarm in Varkos Academy screamed around him, but Daniel barely noticed the noise. His attention stayed on Karuin. The war beast stood only a few feet away, watching him carefully. The entire galaxy had labeled this creature as a weapon. Daniel saw something different. He saw a survivor. "Easy," Daniel said quietly. "I am not here to control you." Karuin did not move. Its large eyes followed every small movement Daniel made. Outside the chamber, Commander Lyra Voss watched through the glass, unable to look away. "How is he doing that?" one officer asked. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. General Kale Draven stood beside them, his expression becoming colder with every second. "This proves nothing," he said. Lyra looked at him. "You cannot seriously believe that." "I believe in results," Kale replied. "A moment of cooperation does not change what that creature was created for." Inside the chamber, Daniel slowly approached the damaged control panel. He noticed something unusual. Karuin was not following him. It was following the source of the unstable energy coming from the system. The creature understood the problem before anyone else did. Daniel looked back toward the observation window. "Commander Voss." Lyra activated the communication channel. "I hear you. The power system is not failing randomly. Something is triggering its response." Kale immediately stepped toward the microphone. "Careful, technician. You are making assumptions." Daniel looked at the ceiling panels above him. "No, I am noticing a pattern." He pointed toward the old control modules along the wall. Those systems were installed years ago. Every time the chamber changes environment, that section activates first. That is where the reaction begins. Lyra studied the information on her screen. After a few seconds, her expression changed. Daniel was right. The system records showed the same sequence repeating for years. Every incident, every warning, every time Karuin reacted, the Academy had mistaken a response for aggression. "General," Lyra said slowly, "we may have misunderstood the data." Kale's face hardened. "Or the human may be manipulating you." Daniel heard that. He did not respond immediately. He simply looked at Karuin. The creature had lowered itself closer to the ground, not in submission, in exhaustion. Then Daniel noticed something beneath the creature's armored plates. A small damaged area that had never appeared in any official report. "There you are," Daniel whispered. Karuin looked at him. That is what everyone missed. He moved carefully toward the medical equipment. "You were not unstable. You were protecting an injury." The room outside became silent. Lyra opened every archived report connected to Karuin. For the first time, she searched for medical information instead of combat statistics. The results appeared slowly. Old records, hidden files, missing evaluations, information that had been ignored because it did not fit the military program. Karuin had not failed training. The training had failed Karuin. General Kale noticed the direction of the investigation and immediately shut down the terminal access. "Enough." Lyra turned toward him. "Why are you blocking the records?" Kale remained silent. That silence told her more than any answer could. Daniel looked through the glass at the general. He finally understood. The greatest danger at Varkos Academy was never the creature inside the chamber. It was the people who had decided they already knew what it was. Then the Academy received a new transmission from the Central Command Network. A classified order. Karuin was scheduled for final evaluation within 24 hours. And this time, General Kale Draven intended to prove once and for all that the war beast was nothing more than a weapon. The classified order arrived at Varkos Academy before sunrise. No announcement. No ceremony. Just a single message that appeared on every command terminal across the facility. Karuin was scheduled for final evaluation. General Kale Draven read the order twice, then quietly closed the screen. To everyone else, it looked like routine military procedure. To Daniel Carter, it looked like a decision that had already been made. "You knew this was coming," Lyra Voss said. She stood across from Kale inside the command room, her voice calm but firm. "The evaluation was planned months ago." Kale looked at her. "And now it will happen." "Even after what we discovered?" Lyra asked. "Especially after what we discovered." His answer surprised her. Kale walked toward the large viewing window overlooking the Academy grounds. "Commander, you are making the same mistake every researcher makes. You are becoming attached to your subject." Lyra shook her head. "It is not a subject. That is exactly my point." Kale turned around. "You are starting to see a creature where there is supposed to be a weapon." Meanwhile, Daniel was reviewing the old records that Lyra managed to recover. The files were incomplete, but there was enough information to reveal the truth. Karuin had been transferred between different military programs for decades. Every facility treated the creature the same way. Observe, test, control. Nobody asked why it reacted the way it did. Nobody asked what it remembered. Daniel closed the file and looked toward the containment area. "You were never broken," he said quietly. "They just never listened." A few hours later, the entire academy gathered for the final evaluation. Hundreds of cadets filled the observation platforms. They had come to see the legendary war beast prove what everyone already believed: that it was dangerous, that it needed control, that Daniel had simply been lucky. General Kale stepped onto the command platform. "Today, we will demonstrate that discipline and structure are the foundation of every successful military program." Lyra watched him carefully. Something about his confidence bothered her. Then she noticed the technicians preparing the control system. "Wait," she said. Kale ignored her. "Begin the evaluation." The chamber activated. But this time, Daniel noticed something immediately. The system was different. The settings were not the same ones used during previous tests. Kale had changed them. "You modified the environment," Daniel said. Kale looked at him through the communication channel. "I adjusted the conditions to produce accurate results." Daniel stared at the screen. "No, you adjusted the conditions to get the answer you wanted." The room became quiet. Even the cadets watching from above noticed the tension. Inside the chamber, Karuin slowly stepped forward. It did not panic. It did not react the way Kale expected. Instead, it looked toward Daniel. Waiting. Trusting. Kale frowned. Interesting. He activated another sequence. The chamber began projecting unfamiliar signals. Lyra immediately recognized them. "Those are from the old conditioning files." Her expression changed. "General, what are you doing?" Kale remained focused on the controls. Proving a theory. Daniel understood what was happening. Kale was not testing Karuin. He was trying to force the creature back into the version of itself that everyone feared. "You want it to fail," Daniel said. Kale looked at him. "I want the galaxy to remember reality." Inside the chamber, Karuin became still. For a moment, nobody knew what would happen. Then the creature slowly turned away from the command signals and moved toward the one person it trusted. Daniel. The entire academy watched as the impossible happened. The war beast ignored the orders of the man who controlled its entire program and followed the human who never tried to control it. Kale's expression finally changed. Not anger, not confidence, something much closer to uncertainty. Because for the first time in his career, General Kale Draven was watching a weapon choose for itself. Karuin stood in the center of the evaluation chamber, surrounded by hundreds of watching eyes. For years, those eyes had only seen one thing when they looked at the creature: a threat, a mistake, a weapon waiting for a command. But now, for the first time, the galaxy's most feared war beast was standing still because it chose to. General Kale Draven stared at the control panel, unable to hide his frustration. "Activate the final sequence," he ordered. The technician beside him hesitated. "General, the response pattern is not matching previous evaluations." Kale turned sharply. "That is exactly why we continue." Lyra Voss watched from the command platform, her hands tightening as she understood what he was doing. This was not a test anymore. Kale was trying to force a result. "Stop the evaluation," Lyra said. The entire room looked at her. Kale slowly faced her. "Commander, are you questioning a direct order?" "I am questioning the purpose of the order." Her voice remained steady. "This is no longer about understanding Karuin. It is about proving you were right." For the first time, some of the officers around them looked uncertain. They had spent years following Kale because he represented experience, tradition, and authority. But now they were watching something different. They were watching someone refuse to accept a conclusion simply because it was convenient. Inside the chamber, Daniel stood a few feet away from Karuin. He could feel the tension in the room. He knew one wrong move could confirm every fear everyone had about the creature. But he also knew something else. Karuin was making a choice. "You do not have to prove anything to them," Daniel said quietly. The creature looked at him. "They already decided what you are." Karuin lowered its head slightly. The movement was small, but everyone noticed. The cadets watching from the upper levels began whispering among themselves. They had been trained to recognize aggression. They had never been trained to recognize trust. Kale looked at the readings on his screen. Impossible. He stepped closer to the monitor. The creature should be responding to the command signals. Daniel looked toward him through the glass. Maybe that is the problem. Kale narrowed his eyes. Explain. You spent years teaching it that every signal meant it had no choice. Daniel paused. Now it has one. The words spread through the chamber like a shockwave. The war beast was not malfunctioning. It was not broken. It was learning. Suddenly, the evaluation system began reporting unusual activity. Not from Karuin. From the old command network connected to the Academy archives. Lyra noticed it first. General, why is the system accessing restricted files? Kill did not answer. She walked toward the terminal and saw the authorization code. Her expression changed. That is your personal clearance. The room went silent. Daniel looked at Kale. You were not testing the creature. Kale remained quiet. You were hiding something. For the first time, the general's confidence disappeared. Lyra accessed the records faster. Old reports appeared. Forgotten evaluations. Removed observations. Details that had never been shown to the Academy staff. Karuin had not failed previous handlers. Previous handlers had failed to understand Karuin. But there was one final file. One that had been locked for years. Lyra opened it. Her face changed as she read the first few lines. General. Kale said nothing. Daniel looked at the screen. What did you find? Lyra slowly turned toward them. Karuin was never classified as a weapon originally. Everyone stopped moving. It was classified as a guardian species. The room went completely silent. Because if that was true, then everything the galaxy believed about the war beast was wrong. And General Kale Draven had spent years making sure nobody discovered why. The words guardian species remained on the screen, glowing above the command platform of Varkos Academy. Nobody spoke. For years, every lesson, every training manual, and every military briefing had described Karuin as a living weapon. A creature that existed only for war. But the truth sitting in front of them was something completely different. Commander Lyra Voss slowly stepped closer to the terminal, reading through the archived information that had been hidden for decades. This cannot be correct, one officer whispered. Lyra did not look away from the screen. Why? The officer asked. Because if this is true, everything we taught our soldiers about Karuin was wrong. Daniel stood quietly inside the chamber, watching Karuin. The creature seemed calmer now, almost as if it understood that someone was finally seeing the truth. General Kale Draven remained silent. That silence was more powerful than any explanation. Lyra noticed. General, she said. How long have you known? Kale looked toward the chamber. Long enough. The answer sent another wave of disbelief through the room. Daniel stepped closer to the communication panel. You knew it was not a weapon. Kale finally looked at him. I knew what it could become. Daniel frowned. That is not the same thing. Kale walked toward the center of the command platform. For the first time, everyone saw the reason behind his decisions. He was not trying to hide a simple mistake. He was protecting a belief he had built his entire career around. You do not understand what happened before Varkos Academy, Kale said. The galaxy was not always peaceful. There were wars that almost destroyed entire civilizations. Karuin was created from a species that protected its world for generations. Lyra listened carefully. Then why erase that history? Kale looked away. Because after the war ended, everyone wanted a simple story. Monsters were easier to explain than guardians. Daniel looked at Karuin. The creature was not a symbol of destruction. It was a reminder of something the galaxy had chosen to forget. But Daniel noticed something else. There is more, he said. Kale looked at him. You always look for the missing piece, don't you? Daniel did not answer. He looked at the old files on the screen. If you knew the truth, why keep testing him? The room became quiet again. Kale's expression changed. Because I needed to know if the bond was real. Lyra stared at him. You used the Academy as an experiment? I needed proof, Kale replied. If Karuin could choose trust over instinct, then maybe the old records were right. Daniel shook his head slightly. You were trying to prove something you already knew. Kale looked toward the chamber. Maybe. Before anyone could continue, a new alert appeared across the command screens. A transmission from the Galactic Defense Network. The message was urgent. Unauthorized access to Varkos research files had been detected. Someone outside the Academy had been watching. Lyra opened the communication channel. A familiar symbol appeared on the screen. An old military research division that had officially been shut down years ago. Her expression changed. They know. Daniel looked at her. Who? Lyra hesitated. The people who wanted Karuin to remain a weapon. The academy lights dimmed as the external security systems activated. For the first time, everyone understood the real danger was not inside the chamber. It was outside, coming for the truth they had just uncovered. Karuin slowly moved beside Daniel, standing between him and the entrance. Not because it was ordered, not because it was controlled, because it chose to protect. And as the academy prepared for what was coming, Daniel realized the galaxy was about to learn the same lesson Varkos had forgotten for years. The most dangerous mistake was never creating something powerful. It was believing that power could never choose kindness. The warning came from the highest level of the Galactic Defense Network, but by the time it reached Varkos Academy, everyone inside already understood what was happening. The truth about Karuin was no longer hidden, and the people who built their power on that secret were coming to take it back. Commander Lyra Voss stood in the command center, watching the security reports appear across the screens. "They are requesting access to the archive," an officer said. "They claim the War Beast program belongs to military authority." Lyra looked toward Daniel Carter. "And what do you think?" Daniel watched through the observation window where Karuin remained beside him, calm and alert. "I think they are afraid." General Kale Draven stood silently nearby. For years, he had been the person everyone trusted. The instructor, the commander, the man who always had an answer. But now he looked different. Not defeated, just tired. "I spent my entire career believing control was the only way to protect people," Kale said. Daniel turned toward him. "And now?" Kale looked at Karuin. "Now I wonder how many things we call dangerous simply because we never try to understand them." Those words changed something inside the room. The officers who had spent years following orders began looking at the creature differently. Not as a threat, not as a tool, as a living being that had been waiting for someone to see the truth. The external transmission arrived moments later. A representative from the old military division appeared on the main screen. "Transfer the creature records immediately. Varkos Academy no longer has authority over this program." Lyra stepped forward. The program was built on false information. The representative remained cold. "History is written by those who maintain order." Daniel looked at the screen. "No. History is written by those who are willing to admit when they were wrong." The room went silent. It was not a powerful speech. It was not a threat. It was simply the truth. And somehow, that made it harder to ignore. The Academy staff opened every archived file and released the complete history of Karuin. The hidden reports, the forgotten research, the evidence showing that the creature was never created to destroy. It had always been a protector. Across the galaxy, worlds that had feared the War Beast for generations finally learned what had really happened. They learned that fear had replaced understanding. They learned that a creature could be called a monster long enough that nobody remembered to ask who gave it that name. Months later, Varkos Academy changed forever. The old War Beast program was gone. In its place was a new research division focused on communication, trust, and cooperation between species. Lyra became the first commander of the program. Kale stepped away from military leadership and spent his remaining years teaching young officers one lesson he wished he had learned earlier. Daniel never became famous. He did not want medals or recognition. He returned to his quiet work, helping creatures and people that others had already given up on. One evening, a group of new cadets visited the sanctuary where Karuin rested. They stood at a distance, still nervous, still unsure. One young student asked Daniel, "How did you know it was not a monster?" Daniel looked at Karuin, who calmly rested beside him. After a moment, he smiled. "I did not know." The student looked surprised. "Then why did you walk closer?" Daniel answered, "Because someone had to be the first person willing to find out." Years later, that sentence was repeated across hundreds of worlds. Not because it was heroic, not because it belonged to a legend, but because it carried a simple truth that every civilization eventually had to learn. The greatest difference between a monster and a friend is sometimes nothing more than the choice of one person to look closer. And in the end, the galaxy did not remember the War Beast because it was powerful. They remembered it because a human being proved that understanding could reach places where fear never could.